Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. And we have a special treat this morning because we're going to be live with the beekeeper. Every question you've ever had about bees, Claire Tauzer today will answer those questions for you. Even if you might be thought they might be embarrassing to ask. It doesn't matter. Claire's going to answer those for you. So we're going to start out with our round robin around the state to give a quick intro, but so that we can get directly to Claire Tauzer with Sola Bee Honey and Tauzer Apiaries here in Woodland. So I am Mary Kimball, Executive Director for Center for Land-Based Learning here in Woodland. And a quick little bee story, everybody's gonna tell a bee story. I actually have a hive in my backyard in Woodland, and I got it about 3.5 years ago. And it's really great to be able to see the bees working, most of the year, actually. It's pretty amazing. And all of my neighbors really appreciate it too, because they get great pollination. So I love that. I love having my own beehive, even in town, which is, by the way, totally legal, in case anyone's wondering. All right, so I'll move it over to Dana.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Dana Baker, coming from Tehama County and run the program up here, and I'm in Red Bluff. And honestly, I've kind of always been a little bit fearful of bees. To this day, has never been stung by a honeybee, so I have no reason to be afraid of them, only been stung by wasps. But since we live in Red Bluff now and there's bees, we're in orchards and stuff all around us, we have lots of bees. And it's really interesting. I've really kind of developed a fondness for the honeybee because they really are not aggressive. And I think that's just such, a stereotype that bees are mean. And as long as you don't make them mad, I can prune my flowers, I can do all that, and they never bother me. So even my kids can try to catch the butterflies and swat at the bees, and they've yet to be stung. So I think it's kind of neat. I just have kind of grown fond of the honeybee. So I'm looking forward to this.
Awesome. Thanks, Dana. Joseph.
Good morning. My name is Joseph Montoya. I'm the Farms Leadership Coordinator for the Sacramento Valley. My connection with bees, I also, sort of scared of them as a youth, but I got older, come to realize that my allergies have always been a huge issue for me, but local honey, I'm a huge believer in that. It's been so great for me. Just a lot of local honey here and there. I don't really have any allergies, just, the watery eyes, the itchy nose, just, looking a hot mess, but I don't really deal with that anymore. And it's really cool because you're really engaging with your local community. You're helping to contribute to a circular economy. You're buying local. You're, in my case, not suffering from seasonal allergies anymore. And you're helping contribute to growing the bee population in your region. So that's it.
That's a local honey. I like it. And that's a good point. Claire can talk about that later, about some of the great benefits of buying local honey. So let's see, Katie.
Good morning. My name is Katie Wortman. I am the Central Valley Farms Leadership Coordinator, coming to you from Fresno. I have been stung. I was 5 years old, golfing on a golf course with my dad, and I was stung in my bottom, I believe. That's like probably one of my earliest memories, and I'm not really scared of them or anything. I just kind of let them do their thing and go about my day. So other than that kind of embarrassing story, I appreciate what bees do, and we have gardens and we plant wildflowers for them. So hopefully, that's not it.
That's helpful. Yay. Okay, Romy.
Good morning. My name is Romy Wattenbarger. I'm the Kern County Farms Coordinator here in Bakersfield. And I'd agree with Dana. I've only been stung by wasps. And when I was younger, I was always timid of bees, but now I've come to grow that they'll only bug me if I bug them. So I try to just leave them alone. But I've only been stung by wasps, so I guess that's good.
That's right. And I think that's the case with most of us.
Yeah.
All right, Letty, you're up.
Hi, my name is Letty Hernandez. I'm the program coordinator in Monterey and Santa Cruz County. I love bees. My middle name is Beatrice, so go by Bee. And my story about bees is that I have a borage plant, and this plant produces edible flowers that the bees just go wild for. And I like to eat them. And so this year when I was picking them, I wasn't really looking. And one of the bees was on there, and I just gave him a little like hug with my hand and then and just let him go. But it was just like a really great moment to, you know, like touch it so gently and connect, I guess.
Yeah, and those borage plants, they're so pretty too. Beautiful flowers. So that's a great point. I think we had some good things here, Claire, to talk about, things that we can do too in our own neighborhoods, our own backyards to help out the bees. So with that, it's great to introduce Claire Tauzer, who I actually have known the Tauzer family, the family that she married into, since I was a kid, because her father-in-law started the Tauzer apiaries, and my dad knew him years ago. And then I got to know your brother-in-law, Joe, when he was in high school, and he was in our SLUS program. And so we have a long history with the Tauzer family. And so when Claire came in, it was great to get to know her. And then she was actually part of our California Farm Academy program. And so then we really got to know you. So Claire, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself. It's so great to see you and have you on today live from the bee area.
Thank you so much, Mary. Yeah, I'm really excited and honored to be featured. I thought I would give you guys a real life glimpse into my day. This is a really fun time of year. So before I go out and show you how I actually package our queen bees, I'll give you a background on myself. So like Mary said, I had the honor of going through the California Farm Academy 4 years ago now, which just seems like yesterday. And some fun, my background before that is I actually went to Chico State, so go Wildcats. And unlike a lot of people that I work with, I actually didn't major in ag. I was an English major, which not everybody knows. I didn't think I would go into ag. I thought I'd be a high school English teacher, which I was for 5 years before I met my husband, Trevor. And then I had the just amazing opportunity to go into business with my husband, and everyone that thought I was a little crazy, leaving my teaching job to be work with honey and bees. And now here I am, gosh, let's see, 8 years later, and I'm really excited. I've learned so much by being in this business. And yeah, so basically, currently I wear a lot of hats. Right now I'm wearing a bee veil because I'm going to actually go out into the hives with you. But my job kind of depends on the time of year. So this time of year, we're really busy with our local honey company, and I brought some honey to show you. Let me see if I can get out of my pocket. I'm holding my phone here. So I run our local honey company, which is kind of my job year round. I'm in charge of all of our wholesale accounts. So we sell honey to Whole Foods and Nugget Market and a lot of our other local markets. And so our honey is right here, if you can see it. This is my favorite kind. This is our sage honey. It's a super light varietal. And I brought that one because I have a fun story about that. So you guys all shared your first time you got stung or how you feel about bees. So I'll share mine. I actually, when I met Trevor, I wasn't sure if I was allergic. And as you might imagine, dating a beekeeper, he kind of needs to know if you're allergic, you know? So he brought me out to the family farm, which is where I am today. Of course, this is years ago before we lived here, but he brought me out and he actually took a honey bee and he stung me with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we waited and we left that stinger in as long as I could handle it. And of course I was squirming and squealing because it hurt a little bit, but I wasn't allergic, thank goodness. And we got married and lived happily ever after.
That's awesome.
So that's my story of getting stung by my beekeeper husband on purpose. And I will say I've been stung by wasps and all kinds of different insects, and honeybees, like everyone mentioned, they really aren't aggressive. They don't want to sting you. Their stingers are barbed, like most of you know. So when they sting you, they actually die, which is really sad. So they, again, are not aggressive unless they're afraid, you know, unless they feel threatened. So in general, you don't have to be afraid of honeybees, but I understand that it can be pretty intimidating because the sting does hurt a bit. So Yeah, so anyway, fast forward to now, my job this time of year is really cool. About 3 years ago, we started actually selling our queen bees. So we've always bred, like Mary mentioned, my father-in-law, Mark, has been a beekeeper since the 70s. And we've always bred queen bees for our own hives so that we could keep our hives healthy, because it's actually important to check your queen bee. Part of maintaining a beehive is checking your queen's health. And sometimes you'll notice that she's not laying as well as she gets older, or she'll just naturally die and you'll have to replace her. So many beekeepers are in need of good quality queens. And so about 3 years ago, we started expanding our business to sell our queens to other beekeepers. And I'm really excited to be a part of that. And so what today I'm going to show you is how I package the bees for sale, because it's a really unique part of the business and not everyone has seen it. So I thought that'd be kind of fun, because it's exactly what I am doing today. And I thought, why not get some work done and then show you how it works. So
that's perfect. Thank you, Claire. This is super exciting. And we'll ask more, I'm sure, about kind of other kinds of bee things, but let's go ahead and start with this part of your work today and show us everything up close and in person. We really appreciate it.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So I'm just going to walk into the queen bank in a minute. And before I get in there, I'll explain. So queen rearing, or queen breeding as they call it, is a really complicated process. So there are so many steps, but I'm just going to show you kind of the end step, which is actually the queens that we've already caught from out in the field in their little nucleus colonies. And they're already in their little cages to keep them safe and to transport them to the next beekeeper home. And then once they get there, they'll put them into their own hives. So what you're gonna see is, and I'll explain it in a minute, but you're gonna see a bunch of queens all in little plastic cages inside a beehive. And the beehives that they're inside of don't have queens. They're called queenless hives, because if they had a queen, then they wouldn't take care of the queens that I put in there. So we actually call it a queen bank, because we stack all the queens inside this safe hive with lots of nurse bees that can take care of the queens while they're basically in the interim between when we get them in the field until they go into their new home. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Sort of, kind of. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead and show us.
All right, here we go. So I'm going to hand the phone off to my colleague, Nick, who's going to flip it around and actually film me getting queens out of the bank, okay? So here we go.
Go, Nick. Okay. Hi, Nick. Good morning.
Morning.
So Mary will know what this is, because she has a beehive. This is a smoker, and we always make sure we smoke the hive a little bit to the smoke calms the alert pheromone down, which makes the bees less aggressive. You got me?
Yep.
All right.
Yes. Yeah.
So we're going to smoke the hive a little bit. So this is our queen bank. Yeah. So inside here, we have what I was explaining are the queen cages in the little bars. So I'm going to use my hive tool, and I'm going to lift one out for you. I'll go slow so you can see. So you see all the bees on top are actually nurse bees, and they are taking care of the queens in the cages. So they're feeding them and making sure they have water. And the queens can live in these queen cages as long as they have nurse bees for, gosh, months and months and months. Obviously they don't need to, but they could if they needed to.
So are the nurse bees female or male?
They're all female. So the only male bees in a hive are the drones. And I'll find one for you in a minute and show you. But for now, all these nurse bees are covering these queen bees to make sure they're safe. And we have to ship them with nurse bees on top, because the queens cannot survive without the nurse bees. Okay, so I'm going to take this. We call this a bar of queens, and there are 42 queens on each bar. And I'm going to actually grab a couple here. Okay, so I'm going to come in here, and then we're going to put them in our special shipping box. So inside the box, before I load it up, you'll see that we have a sponge with water and a little patty of sugar, and that's to keep those nurse bees happy and hydrated so they can take care of the queen, because we have to make sure that all the bees in this box are nice and happy for shipping. And these boxes are made especially for these bars, and they are held in there securely.
Wow. So how many how many are in here? One of these boxes then, Claire? Looks
So
like
when they're full, it can actually hold 168 queens.
Okay. And so do people order that many at a time? I mean, is that like, this is for professional beekeepers, right? So they need a lot of queens.
Yeah, so we mainly sell to pretty moderate to large scale beekeepers. So this is an example of a pretty average order. So yeah, beekeepers, larger scale beekeepers usually order between 168 to even upwards of 500 sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how many queens do you guys produce a year? Is it like thousands of queens?
Yes, so we're really lucky that we have the setup to, sorry, I'm just checking to make sure all the queens look good. So yeah, this year we're looking to produce, gosh, I think upwards of 20,000 over 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
So it's quite an endeavor. So here's a full box of queens. See them all in there? And then I'm going to show you my favorite part, which is actually adding the nurse bees to the very top.
Oh,
so I'll see what that looks like.
You're just going to scoop them? Yeah, scoop them up and drop them in. Oh my gosh.
Kind of, sorta. So
yeah.
we take a frame out of a hive.
Okay.
And we just kind of gently shake them in.
That is awesome.
Very high tech.
Very high tech. Yeah, it does the job. And so how long do they stay in there until they reach? So is it up to a couple days? I mean, how long can they stay in those boxes safely?
Safely, they could probably stay in them for 3 to 4 days, but we ship next day air. So this box of queens will get to its home tomorrow.
Oh my gosh. And where are those queens going? Do you know what
yes.
state?
These ones are going to one of my favorite friends. He lives up in Moses Lake, Washington, and his name's Travis. And I've sent him queens now for 3 years in a row, and he really likes our queens. And so we will make sure that those get to him. And then we close the box. Have these vents so that the queens stay nice and cool, and then that no bees can get out. So
yeah,
it's a specially designed box just for them. And then we'll put the shipping label, and we'll take it straight to the UPS hub in West Sacramento, where it gets straight on a plane, and then it gets to Travis tomorrow. So
that does the box, does it hum? Do you think that all the UPS drivers and the mail, they're probably like, what is in there?
Yeah, well, it's funny because now that I've been doing this a few years, hold on one sec, I'm going to switch you back to my face here. Bye, Queen Bank. Okay, I'm going to walk away. So, hey, Nick, that one might need a little more nurse bees. I didn't pay super close attention because I was chatting. Good thing I have Nick to help me.
That's right. Thank you, Nick.
Bye, Nick. Thank you. Okay, so to answer your question, the UPS always cracks up. Whenever I bring my first box in early April, they're like, oh, it's the bee time again. So they're used to it because we only deal with the hub, and you know, we go there, and it's they don't actually ride on trucks very long. We don't have UPS pick them up because we don't want them to get too hot in the truck. So we deliver it directly to the hub. That way it gets to the its destination safely. Yeah.
Okay, well, you have generated a whole bunch of questions, so I'm going to ask Letty to start unmuting. We'll do this one at a time. So Daniel Martinez is going to be up first. Actually, you have several. I see you have several questions there, Daniel, so you can just ask them at the same time. So, and then Daniel, for the purposes of Claire, make sure to say where you're from.
Hi, I'm Daniel from the Central Valley. I live in Kerman, part of the Farms Leadership Program. How many bees do you hold before you get new ones, and how much do they cost if you buy them? And how much do you sell the queen bees for? And how far do they go?
That is an awesome question. I'm not quite sure I understand. What do you mean? How long do we hold them for? Can you
maybe how long do they live? I don't know.
How long do you keep them in your boxes?
Well, generally hives can live up to 5 years with the same queen, and the queen is continually laying new eggs and regenerating her hive. So I think if that's your question, how long do they live? The answer is anywhere. You know, it really depends on the queen's health and the location they're in, if they have enough food and all kinds of different factors. But in general, queen bees kind of live anywhere between 1 year on the low end and 5 years on the high end.
Yeah. And then his other question was, if you're willing to answer, how much do you sell your queen bees for?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's public information. It's on our website. It's not a secret.
Yeah.
So if you're just going to buy one queen bee, there's a little more work involved. We have to actually transfer it out of those plastic cages you saw. We have to actually put it in a little wood cage, and then we have to add bees inside that cage. So there's a little more work to just sell one queen. So the price is tiered based on how many you order. So the most expensive is one queen, which is $40. And then if you buy them in the boxes, like I showed you right there, they're $25.
Okay, very good. So we're gonna switch it over to Mary now, and same for you, Mary. Tell us where you're from, and then go ahead and answer your ask your question.
I'm from Fresno, and I'm a senior now. But anyways, my question is, what is the process of checking the queen bee's health?
Yeah, that's
great. That's a really, really good question. So my husband's probably the expert on that, but I'll give you my understanding of it. So you look for a lot of different things. So you look inside. First of all, some beekeepers actually mark their queens, and the marking color can dictate the year in which she was put in the hive. So one thing to look for based on how old she is how she's laying. So you can actually look at her, they call it brood. So brood is actually, larva that the queen bee is producing constantly. She's always laying if she's healthy. So one thing you look for is brood pattern. So you look for, is she still producing a lot of new bees? Is she, is she healthy that way? You also can look at the actual queen bee herself, make sure she doesn't have any like wing damage, make sure that the whole, basically you can tell the queen's health by the overall hive health. So does the hive have enough honey? Are the bees bringing in pollen? Is she laying good brood? There's all kinds of different things that you look for in terms of the health. Also, a big issue is mites, which you'll hear a lot of beekeepers talk about. So if a hive has a lot of mites, then it can damage not only all the worker bees, but it can also damage the queen. So you look for a lot of different things in terms of the health check for the hive.
So Mary, I have a hive in my backyard, and my queen was about 4. And this year she had to be taken out and sacrificed for a new queen. And it's because the brood, there wasn't not much larva at all this year. Which should have been, like, it's spring and it's active and all this pollen and stuff, and you should have seen all this larva. And there was very few. So she did her job, great job for 4 years, but we got a new one. So that's an example of how my beekeeper was able to tell that it was time to get a new queen. So we'll switch to Alondra. Alondra, I see you have 3 questions there. So maybe let's do them one at a time, just so Claire can hear each one. So go ahead and start with your first question.
Okay, so my first question is, how do you keep track of all your bees and know you're not taking someone else's by mistake?
Ah, yes. Good question.
Great question. So thank you so much. So all of our beehives are branded. So it's actually the county ordinance now. It used to just be kind of smart beekeeping, but now they actually mandate that every single hive has our name and our phone number on it, just in case somebody needs to contact us if there's any issue, like if it's, I don't know, if it gets knocked over, which does happen, or, basically so somebody knows whose bees they are. So on the outside of the hive, we have a stencil that paints our name on it. And then on the inside, every frame inside, I don't know if you guys remember when I pulled out the frame to shake the bees, that's called a frame. And those are actually branded with our name as well. So that's how we make sure it's our hive. And I think what you're also asking is, since bees fly around, how do you know that they're not someone else's bees? And the answer to that is all the bees that you see flying around. go back to their queen. They know which hive is theirs, and they actually communicate through different dances and all kinds of cool stuff. There's like a whole book written about bee communication, but basically every day the worker bees go out and they, you know, forage for nectar and pollen, and they go back to the same hive every night. So as long as their queen is healthy and alive, they go back to their hive.
Perfect. So Alondra, go ahead and ask your next question. Although we might have answered, nope. Go ahead, Alondra.
Okay, so my next question is, if a bee is sick, what do you do so it won't affect the other bees?
So we actually treat it. It's a really complicated question. So if just a worker bee is sick, there's not a whole lot that you can do for her. You really treat the hive as one animal per se, right? So when we're looking at the health of our bees, we're looking at the hives as a unit. So every queen and her hive is how we treat the health. So if a queen is like we talked about earlier, if she's not laying a lot of brood, or if she seems like, you know, maybe the hive has a lot of mites, there are different things we can do to protect the hive itself, but we can't necessarily treat each individual bee. There isn't like, you know, medicine or anything we can give like the individual bees, but we can treat the whole hive to make sure it gets healthier, if that makes sense.
Yes. Okay, and then one more question from Alondra. She's racking them up today. Go for it, Alondra.
My last question would be, when you ship bees, do you apply warranty if any die on the way? Like when you take them to UPS and they travel extensive miles and something happens to one of the bees in the crate. Do you have like warranty for your buyer?
Yeah, we do actually. I know it sounds crazy, but so the way it works is we have insurance through UPS. So if they don't treat that box, you know, with care and follow the instructions on the outside of it, which says, no, don't leave in the heat, leave out of the sun. And if they delay the shipment, if it doesn't get there within the next day, like we pay for, then they actually have to refund, you know, they have to not only refund the shipping, they actually pay for all the queens that pass away. So they're really good about it. I've actually only had it happen one time, and it was just a kind of a fluke thing where one of the packages got routed to the wrong place and it sat for 3 days. Luckily, they refunded me the shipping, but when we got that box back, the queens were actually still alive. And that's why I put a really wet sponge in there and that food, so that if anything does happen, the bees are usually okay in there for some extra time. So I always err on the side of caution.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Okay, so now we have Chris Patterson. And Chris, don't forget to tell us where you're from. So I think that first question, Chris, I think was already answered. He asked what was the approximate life of a queen bee. So we got that one answered. So go ahead, Chris, and ask the next one.
Hi, I'm Chris from Red Bluff. My first question was what's about the max amount of bees you can generate per box?
So there are thousands and thousands of bees, and it really depends on the health of that queen, and it depends on the time of year. So in the spring, you know, the queens are supposed to be laying, and it's a kind of an extra productive time of year, you could say. So there can be, you know, tens of thousands of bees. So we don't really, the way we actually, this is a good question. It leads me to another piece of information that might kind of help you understand. So the frames inside the box, there's different size bee boxes, and the kind that we run are called 10 frame hives. And so we actually have 10 different frames of, you know, that have different honey, different brood, different things inside the hive. So we actually rate the size of the hive by how full it is and how many frames are in it. So farmers and growers actually request, when you're doing pollination, they'll have requirements. They'll say, you know, we need 8 frame hives for this contract, and you know, we only want to pay for 8 frames and up, which means they want a really heavy active hive so that they can get the most pollination out of the honeybees. So I know it's kind of not directly answering your question, but we don't ever count the bees per se. We count the frames, and we look at the health of the hive and kind of the weight of it. We can tell how much honey is in it. We can tell if it's a healthy queen, if there's lots of brood, and we can tell how productive that hive is going to be based on those things.
So Chris, did you have any additional questions there? I want to make sure that you had 2 questions and that she kind of answered both of them. So I just want to make sure that we covered it for you.
They covered themselves both pretty much.
Okay, great, very good. So let's see, Daniel has another question. Daniel, go ahead and ask yours.
Has anybody tried to go and steal your bees?
Yes. Oh my gosh. It's kind of sad. You know, we have definitely had theft. Let's see, today is 2020. I think it was it must have been 2009 or 10. We actually had a circumstance where we drove out to one of our locations that we have our hives, and they were gone. And my husband was just like, what? And before that, like, it hadn't really been talked about in the news or anything. So it was a really shocking thing. You know, we were just like, where did our bees go? But my husband, of course, decided, I'm going to drive around and try to see if I can figure out what happened. Well, he drove up the road a little ways and he found a can of paint on the ground. And he thought, that's weird. And it was just kind of tossed. He kept driving and he saw a group of hives with the same color paint on them that he had seen in the can on the ground. So he called the sheriff, and the sheriff met him out there. And sure enough, he opened up the hives. They had painted over our name. But when you open them up, like I told you before, the frames have they actually have the wood is, burned, what's it called? Not embossed, but I can't think of the name. But, you know, our name. Yeah, so it's branded with our name, and so you can't paint over it. And you could see inside that it was our hives, that someone had stolen them, painted them quickly, tossed the can of paint, and then moved them only like a half a mile down the road. So we were actually able to locate our hives, and we did end up pressing charges, and the person got in trouble and had to replace all of our bees.
And I know there's been unfortunately, a lot more bee theft since then. That's much more common now.
Yeah.
So, and you guys, the sheriffs I know in all the rural counties always are very active in helping out the beekeepers and keeping track of that kind of stuff. But it's got to be a tough situation when you can be dealing with bee theft when that's your business. So.
Yeah, it's stressful, just like a lot of things in ag. You know, there's a lot of trust that goes into it and a lot of relationships. So I think that the best thing we can do as an ag community is just look out for each other. My husband, Trevor, you know, he's been doing pollination for different farmers for a long time. And so what he does is just check. He just keeps his eyes open. And if you see a lot of beehives with different names all stacked up in the same area, that's usually a red flag. You know, usually you would see groups of hives all with the same name on them, right? So we just kind of keep our eyes open and just try to communicate with each other and have good relationships, and that'll combat any theft.
Yeah, very good. Well, we've got 2 more quick questions here. So let's see. We'll have time for 2 more. So Mary, why don't you ask your question?
So I was wondering, how was your transition from education into agriculture? So what were your steps into that transition? Did you go back to school, or did you just learn from your husband?
Thank you so much for asking that. I actually meant to talk about that more. Thank you. So it was a slow transition. I actually really miss working with high school students. So this is really fun for me. And I miss teaching, and I've actually gone back and done some substitute teaching. So to answer my specific situation is I started working in the summer when I was still teaching, and I would do a little bit of both. I was really lucky to have summers off when I was a teacher. And so I started doing the Sola bee honey work just kind of to keep me busy in the summer. And I learned a lot of on the job, just trial and error. You know, the first time I tried to sell a jar of honey, I walked into a coffee shop, and I happened to know the owner because I'd gone there a lot and drank a lot of coffee. And I said, hey, how much would you pay for this jar of honey? So I really just kind of, you know, tried it out. But then of course, over time, I did a lot of reading. I talked to a lot of other farmers, and then I went to the California Farm Academy through CLBL, where I learned a ton, because I didn't grow up in ag. So one thing I want to tell you and anybody else, I know you all probably have way more information than I did at your age about ag because you're in this program, but you know, you can always go back and learn more, and you don't have to pick just one thing. So what I love about my job is you know, a lot of time of year I can go out and teach about bees. I can still teach and be connected to the community, but I can also work in ag and get dirty and get in a bee suit and get on a tractor and do all that stuff too. So it was a slow transition for me, but I like to think that I'm not only in ag now. I get to do a little bit of both.
All right, we have time for one more. And then for those of you who ask more questions, don't worry, you will get credit. We have a activity going on this month, Claire, where folks, if they're listening live and they ask questions and get their questions answered, they get points.
Oh, cool.
Toward new Chromebooks. So these guys are doing a great job. So, okay, I'm going to choose Alondra, you're back up again since you're the next one on my list. This is a great question and a good one to end on today.
Okay, so my question would be, how do you advocate for bees knowing many people are terrified of them?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, such a good question. So we try to advocate for bees in a lot of ways. So I've been really working on some social media, which is obviously with this whole, you know, social distancing, a lot of people are online and they're reading a lot. I actually have this really awesome new collaboration project that I just did with Rachel Morrison of the Bee Charmers, where we're going to educate people about swarms because people get really scared of when they see swarms. So we're going to talk about why they're not scary and what to do if you see one. Another way we advocate is we do a lot of outreach in the schools. So normal years, obviously this year is not normal, but normally we go out to Farm Connection Day and we have an observation hive and we talk about bee safety, and we do lots of activities with you know, youth and also older adults and anybody who's scared of bees, and we just try to spread, you know, positive information and talk about it that way. So there's a lot of things we want to do, lots more social media, a lot more outreach, and then stuff like this. So please go tell your friends everything you learned here today, because the more we talk about it, the better.
And that's a perfect way to end because like Claire said, they've got great social media. So make sure to check out their website, Sola Bee Honey. Make sure to check out Instagram. They always have great pictures and videos. And if they travel around, not right now, of course, but soon again, hopefully, and go to different events and educational events, they always announce things like that. For example, we unfortunately missed the Honeybee Festival, which was in downtown Woodland, which would have been this coming weekend. Is that right?
It was last Saturday.
Last Saturday. It was such a bummer. There was like 40,000 people here the last several years to learn all about bees and taste honey and taste all these great things. So look for those kinds of things in your own communities as well, as soon as hopefully we get back up and running. But education, Claire's great at it anyway because she's a teacher, but then she obviously likes to spread the word via social media and other ways. So make sure to check those out. And like she said, tell your friends, your parents, whoever might be scared of bees. Make sure they get some good understanding and facts from you. All right, Claire, thank you so much for all of your time today. It's been great to see you.
Great to meet everybody, and thank you so much, and have a beautiful day. We'll see you soon.
You too. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.